Hello and welcome! We have come a very long way since the days of the Commodore 64. Back then, this was supposedly all the computer you would have ever needed. But I wonder, is it still all the computer you can ever need today? To the point where you can run a business off of it. To see if it is, I'm going to use this Commodore 64 and do as much of my normal day-to-day tasks on it as possible. How hard can it be? Check out our games from us at 16-Bit Games. They cover a variety of genres and are available for free on Android and iOS, so why not check them out today? Now, before I begin, I do have to acknowledge the limitations of the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64, in theory, is capable of doing everything a modern machine can. However, in 1982, when the Commodore 64 was released, modern-day tasks like browsing the internet and watching videos weren't really tasks a computer was expected to do. So instead of coding my own solutions that obviously won't work, what I'm going to do instead is change my workload to see what I can do on the Commodore 64. Which means I'm going to make some spreadsheets, type in some Word documents, and of course, play some games. Which is exactly where I started. I scoured the internet looking for games, and only after a brief search, I found thousands of them. I found games that were familiar, games that were new to me, games that I didn't believe got ports, and games that were even made recently. I spent hours playing them. Some of the games weren't good, but the rest were brilliant. I will admit, gaming on a Commodore 64 isn't as easy as plugging a cartridge into an NES. The load times, for instance, are much longer and very annoying. But the Commodore will reward your patience with a treasure trove of amazing 8-bit style games. Many of which, in my opinion, is a lot better than the variety that you find on the Nintendo Entertainment System. But now I do need to put the games down and get some actual work done. The first thing I needed to do was to get some professional software, and seeing how easy it was to find some games, I thought I'd be swimming in word processors and spreadsheet software. This is the most popular computer of the 1980s. It shouldn't be that difficult. Sadly, it was. After hours of searching, I came out with little to show, but I did learn 2 things. The first is that business software doesn't always get backed up. Now, I don't know why this is, but I have a few ideas. Perhaps it's because the format that the software was distributed on is very difficult to back up. Or perhaps it could be due to the copyright protection that the developers implemented into the software. Or just maybe it has to do with the lack of interest in the type of software I'm looking for. But even when I can find some professional software, the second thing I learned is that the SD2IEC, my floppy drive substitute, isn't perfect. I was able to find software that would work in emulation, but once it's on the Commodore 64, for some reason the software chose not to work. Despite this setback, I was able to not only find the professional software I needed, but also professional software that would work on my Commodore 64. I started off with the Spreadsheets software, and the only software that I can find that would actually work on my C64 natively was Easy Working Planner. Despite the lack of options, this was actually a really good piece of spreadsheet software. I was able to enter all my data easily and consistently. Doing calculations was easy enough, and I didn't have to relearn too much. And when I was stuck, the help guide actually was helpful. My only gripe with this software is the lack of joystick support, but even then,
Easy Working Planner is surprisingly usable even today.
With my hopes high, I moved on to the word processors. I had better luck finding more than one software that would work, but calling what I found a word processor is a bit of a stretch. At best, VisiWrite, EasyScript, and StarTexter are nothing more than glorified typewriters. They do their job well, but are missing some crucial components, like spell checking. Of the three, StarTexter was the best, and despite being German, there is an English hack of the software. But I needed more out of my word processors, so I continued to search for software that might not even exist on the Commodore 64. And after much searching and some Wikipedia results, I eventually found the answer that I was looking for: GEOS. GEOS is a graphical operating system for the Commodore 64, a very impressive piece of software on a very weak system. I loaded up my Commodore with all the GEOS software I can find, and once it loaded, it was by far the greatest piece of business software that I've seen from the 1980s. It has a word processor called GeoWrite, and unlike the other software, it wasn't just a typewriter. You have fonts and formatting, and despite the lack of spell checker, in GeoWrite, GEOS has one included called GeoSpell, which can get the job done. GEOS even had a spreadsheet software called GeoCalc, which feels more or less like a modern-day Excel software than what Easy Working Planner had to offer.
I will admit, to use GEOS does require a bit of a learning curve and reading a manual or two, but it is the perfect software if you're trying to actually do business on a Commodore 64.
Which leads me to my conclusion. With your expectations in check and GEOS in hand, the Commodore 64 is a completely usable work machine today, as long as you're willing to live with a few compromises. First, the Commodore 64's load times are excessive. The constant switching of floppy disks is very, very annoying. The compressed screen size and not being able to see my full reports is annoying to myself. And the inability to share your files with anybody else that doesn't have a Commodore 64 is a bit annoying.
I am very surprised with how much a machine from 1982 can still do even today. However, not being able to properly go online and a few other obviously missing features means that sadly I will have to stick with my current machine. But as a positive note, I do have some new games that I intend to play. So, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and have yourself a nice day.